What's up, everybody? So in case you hadn't heard, Xbox is putting all their games on PlayStation, Nintendo. They'll be out of console business in 10 years. The sky is falling. You know, all of this is happening, right? And Xbox is dead. No, Xbox is not dead. All of that seems a bit hyperbolic, but I do think it's interesting to discuss what I think's going on here. Now, obviously, we won't have any surefire response until Phil tells us what the plan is, but I'll give you what I think the plan is and why I think it's that way. And I think really it's all pretty simple. If you look down to, the Zenimax acquisition, the Activision Blizzard acquisition, you throw in the Obsidians of the world, the Ninja Theories of the world. Like, if you throw in all the acquisitions that they've made over the last several years, you're probably talking about the better part of $100 billion. And not just $100 billion, but now you have, what, 30 plus, probably closer to 40 different studios that you're now supporting development costs on. So not only do you sink almost 100 billion, but you have massive overhead that right now has not really been generating a whole lot of games for sale. And, you know, when you make that level of investment, you have to see a return on it fairly quickly. And while I know a lot of Xbox people probably thought this was solely to grow the brand and this was solely to grow Xbox and this is solely to sell Game Pass subscriptions, that math never mathed. All right. First off, when you evaluate a company, when they agreed to buy Zenimax, when they agreed to buy Activision Blizzard, all of those evaluations were likely based off of, at least in some part, their sales on PlayStation platforms. So to agree to that evaluation, to pay them essentially that value, knowing that that value is based off of platforms that you will not be releasing that content on, let's put it this way. When they bought ZeniMax, I made a video. You can go back and I will probably pin a comment with a link to the video. I thought that they weren't going to make Bethesda games exclusive. The reason I thought that they wouldn't make them exclusive, and obviously I was wrong, or at least for the time I was wrong, was because it was financially asinine to do so. You know, if you basically pay a premium for, those publishers and then deliberately devalue them, I mean, for an analogy's sake, that's a bit like buying a sports car and then ripping out the engine and putting in the engine of a mid-size sedan. And that's not a disrespect to the Microsoft fan base. It's just the amount of people that you reach on Xbox. Let's put it this way. It is very reasonable to assume that it's essentially the smallest of the big three as far as install base goes. I mean, I think that's pretty reasonable at this point. It doesn't make any sense for Microsoft to agree to invest close to $100 billion when all is said and done. And you are tying that solely to the performance of Xbox. And I think what a lot of people thought is Microsoft owns Xbox, so obviously Microsoft is doing this all for Xbox. But Microsoft's goals and Xbox's goals don't always align. And when you put that kind of money in, I guarantee you Xbox was probably telling them, hey, if you invest in this, we're probably, we're going to start taking the lion's share of the console market, or at least make ourselves competitive. We're going to be selling, we're going to grow the subscription base for Game Pass, and it's going to be, everything's going to, I'm sure the rosiest picture was painted for Microsoft when they agreed to make these acquisitions. But simply put, there was never any math that would have made what they thought was going to happen, particularly now, because if you look at what has actually made it out from those acquisitions, we've got Redfall, we got Starfield, and I think Starfield's probably gets a little bit more hate than it deserves, and I understand why, because it really, it's probably the weakest main Bethesda title that they've released, and it has a lot of questionable decisions with the use of procedural generation on content that I think did not help the game, but I still think it received more hate than what it deserved. That said, that's what they've essentially got from these products so far. And while I do believe Starfield sold fine, it's not going to change the dynamic. So what I think will happen essentially is I think you're going to see that Zenimax or Bethesda games and Activision Blizzard games will probably launch exclusively to Microsoft, exclusively to Xbox for a time. And then eventually down the road, they will take that over to PlayStation or, you know, Nintendo's future platform if it will support those titles, and try to make a little bit more off of those titles, try to reach a larger fan base. And I think it only makes sense to do so. I realize that a lot of Microsoft fans probably thought when they made these acquisitions that this was Microsoft's power play on behalf of Xbox. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, Microsoft agreed to make these acquisitions, but there was probably always a short leash on, like, you better grow immediately or else we're going to have to start doing other stuff. Now, I know there's been other games that aren't necessarily part of that equation. Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves. I also know there's been some rumors about Gears. I will wait until we see a little bit more before I would, you know, entertain those. Obviously, Starfield, I think that's a no-brainer. So I think what you're going to have happen is essentially Activision Blizzard and Bethesda will go from being exclusive to timed exclusives. I don't believe they will be moving every one of their titles. I think Phil has said use the term case-by-case basis relatively often, so I think that's probably how it's going to be addressed here. And I think you'll see smaller niche titles that maybe don't have already done what, you know, garnered what goodwill and grown the Xbox brand as much as they could and have now done what they could. I think you'll see they'll try to move those titles over. So that's where I think Hi-Fi Rush falls in, is like, I don't think Hi-Fi Rush can grow Xbox any more than it's already done. I think you look at a title like Sea of Thieves, it's a multiplayer title. And obviously for multiplayer titles, you want as large of a install base as possible to, you know, as large of a player base as possible to keep the game alive. I'm kind of frankly a little bit surprised that that move didn't happen sooner, just because, you know, I granted Sea of Thieves has already reached PC, so there's a larger player base there, so probably the game's not in, you know, danger of dying, but over time it's going to dwindle even further. And so I would think that you would have wanted to start growing a PlayStation fan base for that game a while ago. I think that one's a little bit late, but better late than never, right? Anyways, though, like, I think people are going crazy. They're like, oh, we're going to see Halo on PlayStation. We're going to see Gears on PlayStation. Maybe, I can't. I mean, I don't know what Xbox's plans are, and I don't know what Microsoft is dictating to Xbox at this point, but I would think that would be maybe a bridge too far. I don't really think they're going to be able to move those, because particularly Halo. Because Halo is synonymous with Xbox. Like, everybody tries to call it the big three, Gears, Forza, Halo. It's really not. It's the big one and then the other two. Like, Gears and Forza are not, like, they don't have the brand recognition that Halo is. Like, you show Master Chief to people, people know who Master Chief is. That's the only visual branding that Xbox has with a character. That's their Mario, their Link, their Kratos is Master Chief. I don't see him moving to PlayStation. If that's the route they're going, then yeah, this could be a little bit more serious than what I think it is. But honestly, right now, I think you just look at what's happened with the acquisitions and realized that was never going to be solely for Xbox, or at least they tried to do it. But I mean, when you have that much money invested, not just the amount in acquisitions, but the overhead, you can't just simply put all that content and your profit is going to come solely from new Game Pass subs. I mean, at the end of the day, since the acquisitions happened, we know that console sales have not improved dramatically for Xbox consoles. And while I do realize that there are some Game Pass subscriptions on PC, the lion's share of them are probably still attached to Xbox consoles. There's probably still, by far, their best attach rate to get a Game Pass subscription is to have an Xbox console in your household. So I don't really see, if you can't grow the sales of the actual hardware, then your ability to grow the sales of the actual Game Pass is limited, because Nintendo's not going to allow you to sell Game Pass on their hardware. Sony definitely ain't going to allow you to sell Game Pass on their hardware. So you're pretty much locked on PC and Xbox. And like, if that's the case, then there's really only so far you can take Game Pass. You're going to reach that saturation point. And at that point, with Microsoft having this much money invested, they have to pivot. And so I do think, like I said, you will see some of the stuff, particularly the recently acquired stuff, make its way over in a timed exclusive manner over to PlayStation. And if you're upset about that, I get it. But at the end of the day, this is the move that's going to ensure that Game Pass can still stay around. Now, they might be modifying Game Pass. I always thought the day and date was a bit crazy, just because allowing your player base to pay $10 and access every single one of your new titles, given what you have to put into those titles and development costs, always seemed a bit over generous. And I don't mean over generous in the way that like, oh, you should be thankful you're getting more than you pay for. I love that it is generous. It just fiscally is a bit crazy to me. Anyways, that's going to be it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we will catch you on the next one. And until then, guys, get awesome.